Hello again. I hope everyone has been doing fine and chipper. I know I'm wearing my trench coat. That means we're approaching autumn. Or is it already fall? I haven't really been paying attention. It's hard to gauge since I lost my job. But anyways, I love my jacket a lot. I look like two kids stacked on top of each other in a Looney Tunes cartoon. But anyways, I wanted to go for a walk because I was going a little stir crazy at night. It's like a little past 1:30 a.m. Like time even matters anymore at this point. And instead of like just moping about the usual crap, I have actually wanted to do a video that would be a little productive. So what I have been, let me get my water. What I've been talking about lately on my channel, in my social circles, on social media and all of that, is the fact that I have been working on my first book, which is kind of a big deal for me. So before I go into anything, I wanted to say that I want to describe how I'm putting this book together for those who are novices in writing. I consider myself a novice to an extent. Just explain my process, how I'm putting it together, what's informing it, what's the structure of me writing it, like my routine and all that. And I'll actually briefly tell you about what the book is actually about without going into spoilers or anything, assuming the day comes where it does get published and then you can enjoy it for yourselves. But anyways, so sorry, it's very I'm back in that local park that I've been walking around in, and there's this really crazy looking mist. And it's kind of like it's kind of like dislodging the nasal passages a little bit, so I'm sniffing a little bit. That's probably why. But anyways, let me first talk about myself and my beginnings with writing. Now, for those of you who've watched any video on this channel, you know how I started writing, but like I didn't really talk about what happened after that. So basically, long story short, I began writing on February 14th, 2015. I've been creative all my life, drawing, writing little comic books on sticky notes held together by scotch tape and things like that. But I didn't get serious about writing, like actually creating a library of everything I was doing, until Valentine's Day of 2015. That was the big day for me. So yeah, it's been precisely well over a decade at this point. So a very big advent has come and gone. I think I made a video on that day, but that's long in the past now. But anyways, I've been doing that for as long as I have. It's been serving me well, and I'm still doing it. So basically, what type of stuff do I write? I've been writing a whole ton of stuff, like unfinished drafts of stories that'll never be finished. But on top of that, things I did finish, I did a lot of poetry, short stories, character development, world development, things of that nature. A lot of fantasy. Oh, sorry, there's a lot of sprinklers around here, so I'm just hearing these spurts of water everywhere. Sorry about that. But yeah, it's been very interesting to see all those themes kind of tie together. Like, it started off as being very short poems, like in my English courses. But then when I had that dream, it escalated into me creating my first 20-page short story, which is really cool. And ever since then, everything that I've written, drawn, created, etc., I've been putting into a digital library. I have it in the cloud, and I also have some physical copies. So if the cloud breaks up there or something, I don't know what that would look like, but if that were to ever happen, or I got hit by a double-decker bus, then there would be a physical archive for people to find in my death. So nice to be insured, have a fail-safe, right? But the biggest thing about my writing is how it evolved. When I started college, well, not even when I started college, well, at least when I began, I was studying philosophy. I had a lot of philosophy courses, really enjoyed them, but I swapped to a philosophy major midway through college. I actually started with an English major and a philosophy minor, and then I flipped them, thanks to the the coercing of a really nice professor of mine. So that's one of the greatest decisions I've ever made. I mean, a lot of people are really butthurt about, oh, when you get a philosophy major, you can't necessarily become a philosophy professor. We've talked about that before. It ain't gonna happen, and that's fine. I did a whole committed video on that if you want to check it out. But I'm not butthurt about that. The fact of the matter is, it's informed me on how I approach every single thing I do, as well as every single inconvenience that occurs to me, and how to maximize every great moment that happens to me, and to create those great moments. So philosophy is very important to not just my writing, but also how I conduct my life. But as for the writing I do, that allowed me to elevate just that raw fantasy, basic, simple storytelling, and poetry, and themes, and bring them a little higher, and create more of a cohesion between everything I'm writing, weaving in certain themes I have learned from Eastern philosophy, the German pessimists and nihilists, things of that nature. People who have been dead for thousands of years, that's kind of the point. But again, I'm not here to talk about philosophy. It's just what informs me as a writer. And for everyone, it's different. But that being said, I've been writing all this content. So a lot of things I finished, a lot more I have not. I got a folder specifically committed to all of that stuff. And all that is to say, been writing seriously for myself for over 10 years. I've never published a damn thing. I've just been writing for myself, set little goals on the side, like whether it be in between classes and study halls at high school, or when I have spare time when I'm studying at college, or now in my adult life when I was employed and sitting at my cube and finish all my tasks for the day. But now that I'm unemployed, due to circumstances I've explained in full many times already, I have a lot more time to write, so I've been able to do a little bit more in that regard. So that being said, the moment that we've all been waiting for, like what am I working on right now? I have been writing my first actual novel. I started last December 2024. We are now in September of 2025, which is crazy. I should preface with saying during that last year, I believe in the summer, maybe a little earlier than that, I was like, I have all these incomplete stories that are really important to me, but they're unrefined, they're incomplete. I want to revitalize them, give them new life, so that way they're in a more cohesive state, so they're more presentable. Not necessarily to anyone in particular, but just so I can go like, oh, here's that story, and it's done, it's good. And then I was gonna say ship it off. That's not true, like it's saying in my record, but like if anyone stumbled upon my flash drives or my cloud drive or whatever, and then I'm like, oh, hey, here's a full story that this guy actually managed to write. So I decided to go back and tackle some of my stories and bring them back from the dead, if you will, in greater form. So first culprit of that was a story called Prototype. I attempted to write it maybe twice in the past and never finished it. This story goes all the way back to high school. And there were a whole bunch of outlines, drawings, illustrations, things of that nature, and a cohesive outline. So I knew what the story was, how it began and ended, who the characters were, etc. But I've never actually finished a full version of the story aside from an outline. So I spent a summer, a fall, and the earlier half of a winter to do a short story of Prototype, and that wound up being about 50 pages, which is usually as long as anything I do gets, at least at that point. The first 50-page thing I did was actually back in high school when I did Automaton. That was my first very long short story, which I still have archived. I actually have two versions of that whole story for another day. But anyways, Prototype, it was the first of this round of stories that I was revitalizing. So the next thing I wanted to do was like, hey, this was great. I was very happy with how it came out. Again, for myself, didn't mean to get it published or anything, and looking back, it was a little crude. So I was like, you know what? The next thing I'd like to do is focus on one of the characters that's in this story, who we don't meet until later, but there's clearly a lot more going on with them than met the eye. They have this whole history decades before, and it would be cool to explore that more. There was a lot of raw, untapped potential in that. And this character was called the Apex Amist, and he is actually the oldest character that I have record of in my records, beyond those 10 years that Valentine's Day. He goes all the way back to a Halloween mask my dad got me in elementary school. And ever since then, that one character has gone through all these different designs, had different names attributed to him and things of that nature. But anyways, he landed in a number of stories, complete and incomplete. One of them was Prototype. So I'm like, the next thing I'd like to do is create a short story of this Apex Amist character, but a prequel. So this is going to be something called Step Apex Rising, and that was going to be the working title, but now it's the concrete title for reasons that I might have explained before, I'm not sure. But all that being said, I started writing the story, and this is where I got into the structure of how I write a thing. So I started with an outline. There were some ideas I already had floating around about how this character came to be, how they started off, what characters were in their lives before the events of Prototype, things of that nature. So it was more of like a Frankenstein situation where I didn't have a concrete outline that pre-existed. I had to take old ideas and new concepts I learned from my personal life and also from philosophy especially, and tie them together. So I was stitching together a whole bunch of different concepts to make an outline. I don't remember how long that took me, maybe I'd say a month at the most. I'm not sure. I didn't like pinpoint a timeline or anything, but it wasn't too hard for me because, again, this character's existed for well over a decade, and I had brand new, fresh concepts from recent experiences that knew I could loop into the story, and that's how it worked out. But anyways, so I started writing the short story after I had the outline. So it was like color by number, more or less, or like write by number. I had the outline. I just had to write out each step in length. So it was already structured out, which is how I prefer to operate. Everything is so organized for me. So I'm like, got 10 pages in for the beginning of the story. I'm like, hey, this is kind of cool. All right, great. I'm liking how this is going. It's kind of different writing style than Prototype was. It's a little bit more vivid. It's more descriptive and all of that. So I kept doing that. And then I added more, got to 20 pages. 20 became 40. And it became 100. And I'm like, whoa, wait, whoa. How do we get here? And I resolved at that point. I'm like, you know what? I guess this is going to be my first novel. And the reason why that's such a big thing is in previous years, I wasn't able to do full novels, try as I did, because, you're crazy, angsty high schooler, you can't really commit to something that big. I also had all these crazy ideas flying around in my head. It was so hard for me to focus on one and isolate myself on that, so that's why creating an outline really helped to structure me out. So now that I was in my adult life and I had a structure, which at the time had a job in the loop, I was able to create a routine and focus on it, like laser focus on it. But now that the job's gone, I have even more time, so I can keep doing it. But I guess the next thing to describe is, so I was talking about the structure, just to wrap up on that. One important thing I'm doing in my story is I'm actually not doing chapters at all. I feel like that's something that would be a little too regimenting, especially since when you're writing a story, you realize that there are certain things that need to be added later, or things that need to be cut. So for now, I'm just doing mostly stream of consciousness, but still in tandem with the outline that I have. So I can still add details to expand on a pre-existing moment that I already had planned for several months before or whatever. So things are still malleable because I don't have the regimented chapter structure. But at the same time, I still want to pace myself in knowing what the timeline of this story is. For this character, the Apex Amist, who isn't called Apex Amist yet, he's called Steppenwolf initially. How long is this story transpiring for him? And I resolved it's going to take 1 year. It's going to last from around Halloween time until around the summer after, something like that. So it's a course of a year. So I broke up this story in like 4 moments of this guy's life, and the best way to do that was 4 seasons. So, and I just didn't want to just go fall, winter, spring, summer. That's boring, right? Especially since I have elevated philosophical, semi-religious themes in there. So I actually went a different route. I'm actually titling them Samhain, which is the first act. I call them acts. Second one is Yuletide, so Christmas time. Third one is Penance, so Easter, things of that nature. And then the fourth one, which I actually just began last week, so I'm almost done with the first draft, which is awesome, is Solstice, and that's, well, summer, so sun and all that stuff. Kind of a major plot point, but anyways, won't get into that. But that's why I'm blocking things out. I'm not trying to get too regimented or strict, so that's something I'd recommend for you. Just get the story done, break it up into chapters later. That's what I'll be doing next. And if you do that, then you have the opportunity to make the chapters on their own. Like if you're looking at the table of contents, not table of contents, but just a list of chapters, whatever, then you can kind of pin down a theme. Maybe you want every chapter to be a single word. Or I had this crazy idea of maybe when you're just reading the chapters, they come out as a poem, like on the side. So that's an idea I'm playing with. It's not set in stone, but it's just something else you could do if you want to get that anal retentive like I am. So anyways, that's how I'm structuring writing this. And when am I writing? It's another thing. I make a concerted effort. I think I've spoken about this before, but not in depth. There's a coffee shop on a few blocks away from where I live, and I go there every Saturday, sometimes Sunday if I gotta move things around, but pretty much every Saturday. I sit down, grab myself a little breakfast around noon, 11 o'clock, something like that, and then I can keep trucking until the place closes at like 5:36. Like I go, especially since I already have an outline. I know what I'm writing. All I need to do is just write out the bullet points that I have in greater depth and add things that I already knew that the outline doesn't acknowledge. So we're kind of working together. The outline's a separate entity, and then I know the nitty gritty. and that outlines a basic structure. So that outlines a skeleton, then I'm the meat, effectively. That embroidered that on the pillow. But anyways, and it comes out really naturally for me. I know exactly what to write. I know exactly what every character is saying. I know where they're going to go. I know where they're going to look, what they're going to pick up and drop, who they're going to kill, because there's murder in this story. So it flies out really organically. And the reason why I mention when I write, how long I write for, and I can nail out like 20 pages in 6 hours, 5 hours, is to say, everyone writes at their own pace. There are people again, I mentioned several times I started a writing group in town, which has been my life force for the past year. It's great. It's wild to me. There are folks in that group where they need to take weeks off, and even then they can only get like 2 or 3 pages done, or they don't even have a concept yet for their story. Like there are people here who are spending months and months thinking of what their story is going to be. They don't even know what the characters are. They don't know what the themes are. They're still trying to boil things down and simmer it down to the core elements that are going to be their focus, right? So they're a lot earlier in that process. But for me, I've been running with ideas since well over a decade, if you exclude the Valentine's Day dream and all that. So I kind of know what I'm doing to an extent. I mean, I say that with as little naivete as I can, because there's still corners I hit where I'm like, wait, I need to connect the dots better between point A and point B here. So there's still moments of, I'm not too sure what I'm doing, but that goes for all writers, right? But to my main point, everyone has different writing habits. They may or may not have a routine. And that's something, if you want to approach a book, again, this is coming from someone who's not published at all. It's someone who just has done this as leisure for the past 10 years, a spiritual practice. Experiment with finding your rhythm, a routine. How long can you write before you get writer's block? Or you run out of ideas or something like that. Or you just simply get tired, you get exhausted. That happens too. That happens to me. I did a shorter session last weekend because I'm starting the last act of the story. This is where things finally tie in. I don't want to write too much in case I have a new idea of if I want to warp anything or pace things out a little bit. So, I actually say it's good to take some breathing room in between your writing sessions to think about the different ideas and what you want to be in the story. Very important. So allow yourself to breathe, allow yourself to marinate on where you are or where you aren't, and then things will kind of organically tie together. And also consider, do you need prep work before starting? Do you need to take notes, do a simple brainstorm? I'm very particular, I'm very organized. I need an outline. That's just what I do. That's how I studied in college, and that's how I write my stories. So it's interesting how it gave me that discipline. But for you, it might not be that way. Maybe you just want to have kind of a word cloud, or maybe just jot down words like crazy. Don't worry about grammar corrections or anything, cleanliness, whatever. Jot words down that are meaningful to you, or just type them out if you prefer to type. I'm a typer personally. And whatever is for you, because all writers are different. That's just how I roll. 6 hours, 20 pages every week. That's what I do every weekend. But for you, that might be perfect for you, or it'll be something totally different, or it's going to be something that's modification of that. Maybe you do 3 hours 2 times a week, and you crank out 5 pages for each of those 3 hours. It's different for everyone. So that's a structure. And yeah, I'm trying to think of anything else I could say regarding the process. That's right. Yeah. So the themes I'm looping in, well, I'll save that for when I talk about the content of my actual story. But as for what else I could say about the structure and the writing process itself, this is a very generic piece of advice that any writer, professional or not, publisher or not, would tell you, but I wholeheartedly agree with. When you're writing, try not to double back too much. After you write a sentence, don't check it for grammar, check it for flow. Write it down. Just be sure you have the basic structure framework of your story down. And then after you do all of that, you can do a pass maybe a week from then, several weeks from then, or whatever, and then you can do the little mechanical stuff like grammar, plot, fluidity, if there's any little plot holes, minor things, for example, I thought of, there was one moment where I had characters that were driving in a van, then they leave the van and they go somewhere else, and then part of me is like, wait, so what happened to the van, so that's something I had to go back and fix, actually. I don't know if I did fix that. Well, I'll check. Maybe I did. I don't remember. But, you're going to notice little, like, barely important, but little tiny continuity errors like that later, but don't worry about that now. Just write it down, stream of conscious. If you got a plan, abide by that plan and tweak it as you go and stuff like that. Like, the last thing I could say is I even take breaks. Not really breaks. I would imply that I hold my schedule. I don't. Rather, I add to it. But I take little intervals in the middle of the week or something like that before my main writing session on the weekend, where I go back to what I wrote previously. So again, I average about 20 pages every weekend. And then I read over that. Then I revise it. I spot check it for anything plot-wise that's off, grammar, spelling, stuff like that, formatting, paragraph breaks, and I worry about it then. And I don't have to focus so much on adding, that I could just focus on the cleanliness. And, of course, it's not the end of the story. When you finish the entire draft, you're going to want to go back at several passes and do your revisions again. And then add chapters if you haven't before. So that's what I'm going to do. So, last thing, that's pretty much all I can say on structure. If you have any comments, drop them in the comments. If you're curious about any other parts of the process, at least how I operate. I'm just one guy, and I'm unpublished, so what do I know? But now I'd like to talk about what my story is about and what ideas it's comprised of, right? Your stories have to be informed by something. They can't just exist, at least as far as I'm concerned. You can't just regurgitate them. They need to be informed by yourself, stories from the outside. There's got to be a cutting edge to that, right? So, anyways, what's the story about in one or two sentences? Again, there's a character called the Apex Amethyst. He's not the Apex Amethyst yet. In fact, he has no name when he wakes up. What I mean by waking up, I'm sorry. So in a few sentences, there's a young man, 20 years old, around there. He wakes up in a casket being cremated alive, and he breaks out. And there are 3 points here. He has no memory. He's totally amnesiac. He doesn't even know his own name. There's a disembodied voice in his head telling him what to do. And everywhere he looks, there is a mysterious red mist that funnels in around anyone who is about to die or anyone who's about to kill. It's almost like this parasitic supernatural force, and he doesn't know what that is. So as his voice is telling him what to do, where to go, and things of that nature, at the same time, it's not just a fight for survival in this horrible, devastating city, which we'll talk about in a few seconds here, but also, what is this red mist? What does it mean for in this world? How come no one else can see it? And it's just this one guy who doesn't even know his own name right now. So that's the basic, like, back of the book. That's what you'd read, right? It's just that simple synopsis, with perhaps a few little tidbits in there that I didn't mention. So what informed this story? The first thing is, I mentioned that this is one of the oldest characters I work with currently, and he goes all the way back to elementary school, and I've been working on him. Like, he was initially an alter ego of sorts, but at this point, the character has diverted so much from myself. He's now his own thing, which I like. It's good. It would be boring to just make him me, and just write a diary at that point. I mean, if you want to do that, go for it. But for me, I'd rather have a character who is very distinct. So I had the character, but the reason why I couldn't figure out an origin story for him is because I couldn't figure out what world he sprang from, what world formed him, right? That was very important to me. And I couldn't figure that out. I had such weird ideas, man. I was thinking, oh, maybe he's like a Hannibal Lecter type, and he's in a hospital, and there's some detectives trying to learn about his story. And I'm like, that's really boring and generic, like, so many movies have done that. I wanted to be from his point of view, not some boring cop's point of view. I mean, not that cop plots are boring or anything. They're great. It's just, I want to do something different. I want to do it from the killer's perspective. And then at the same time, I was like, oh, maybe he was like, he was at college, and then he started a revolution at college. I had the stupidest ideas looking backward, like, it just didn't work. But again, that goes to show that wait as long as you want for certain ideas, just write them down and let them sit for years even. And then when you get the right life experiences, something will come to you and inform that. For me, what was that experience? In 2019, midway through college, I interned in Boston, where I do not live, so I had to go in with my dad into the city. The internship was great. I liked that a lot. It was a really good experience. However, there was one thing I did not like: Boston. I despised the traffic. I wasn't even behind the wheel, and I had the gall to hate the traffic. I hated going in, hearing all the noises, the sights, the sounds, then going into the office, and then, like, taking that time to breathe, and then 8 hours after I'm done with my shift, I leave, and I'm back into the crazy crap, and until we leave town, right? Leave the city. I hated that so much. And dare I say it, my high functioning autism or Asperger's, that was a huge informant of that because my senses were so escalated. It made Boston seem so much more irritating and obnoxious than it probably objectively is, right? So I understand that now, but at the same time, what if I took those over amplified perspectives of what Boston is? I'm sorry, what Boston is. Boston was what it's called in the book, and turn that into a literal setting for the story that I'm working with, that this character can evolve from. So I took one of my own delusions and I made that literal fact in this story. So now I had a setting that I could build around this character and then I could create a story, which is a great thing. So I guess the next thing is like what kind of themes and other characters are here. So I already had characters who I knew would be part of this character's story. It's like he's got a right-hand woman, like a henchman sort of person. She's like barks orders. She's very dangerous. She's very vicious. But at the same time, throughout all my years of having this character on the back burner, I was like, where does she come from? How'd she get this way? Why is she so nasty? So I wanted to reverse engineer this character and then drop her in this Brostum setting with Steppenwolf. That's a name that he lands on shortly into the story. Not really a spoiler at all. So then it's a question of like how do these characters meet, how do they work off of each other, what do they learn from each other, things of that nature. So that's one way that some of my characters are put in. They're older characters who still need development, who are relevant to the main character, and then they can both grow together and teach each other or fight against each other, depending on who we're talking about. I also had the opportunity to create some really awesome new characters. There were some that I created as I was doing the outline. There were some that I created like midway through. Like maybe I had an idea like, oh, there's going to be one scene where there's a whole bunch of characters at a bar, which is a scene in the story, by the way, and it's still there. And there's going to be a bartender of some sort, like nondescript. He's not going to talk or anything. He's just going to pass out drinks. That's it. Maybe look kind of cool. That's it. But since then, in recent months, maybe last 2 months, I've not only expanded on him, but I've given him a name. I know how he looks. I know how he moves. I know how he talks. He's no longer mute. And he's actually going to play a minor role in the rest of the story. I can't say what that role is, but now that he exists and beyond just being a cardboard cutout of a bartender, he actually gives you a whole new perspective on how some people think about other people. I can't go into specifics here within this world. There's a lot of us versus them mentality in this city. What are those groups? I can't really get into that. But just by him existing, just by him having several lines, even a few, you understand how other people think in this city about certain groups. So I think it's very important to have that paradigm working in there, operating in the background. Little notes. Not every character needs to be super present, just so they can serve the plot, say or do enough things so you understand this fictional world better. And again, I'm speaking for someone who exclusively writes in fiction, right? So, in fantasy, so that's very important to mention. And the last thing that informs my work is the philosophy, right? The themes. One of the biggest things that I studied was social contracts. It's always fascinated me. Basically, when you have a government, what is the best possible contract that can be established so the government benefits and the people benefit and they benefit each other? What is the best contract so there's a nice, well-oiled autonomous system, right? And that's very complicated. Who did that? Rousseau was one of them. I think Descartes also dabbled in that as well. Maybe a little bit of Kant. I don't remember. I have all my college papers saved in a folder, but that's neither here nor there. That's one of the concepts that I have operating in the story. But I know they sound really big and hard to digest. But what I did in this story is I reduced it. So we're not really talking about government contracts. In fact, the government is so big and nebulous, we actually don't know how this government functions in the city. Neither does the main character, so we don't know as a result. It's all from his point of view. Speaking from the third person, but we only know as much as he knows. But what I did is I shrank the social contracts concept, so rather than being between government and populace, it's between person and person. When we make friends, when we get to know people, we have usually unwritten social contracts which have these unspoken rules, boundaries, and promises, right? And that's what retains friendships, relationships, whether they're platonic, romantic, for as long as they do, years, decades, whatever have you. But the issue with the idea of a social contract, this is me kind of doing a counter argument towards the essence of a social contract. As much as I love them, I love rebuttaling against them. That's what I do. What happens if the contract falls flat? What if there's fallacies? What if one person at one end of the contract adopts new perspectives, learns new ideas that is not regarded by the people on the other end of the contract, right? So what if the main character learns something new about the world, or rather how he conducts himself, how he handles other people, and he changes his morals, his ethics based on that? But then he has a friend or two who are also within this contract that was established months, years ago, whatever. Again, isn't just speaking to the book, but just my philosophical idea. What if the other people or person on the other side of this contract, they don't adopt those same new ideas that this other character has, right? And then it's a question of, are these new ideas that the main character adopted valid? Are they right? Are they more good? Or are they making a mistake in raising their standards? And if they are on the right, can the person on the other side of the contract, can they rise to meet them? Or will they just be trapped in their old ways, unable to grow? And that's not just informed by philosophy. It's informed by a lot of friendships I used to have, but no longer do, because I felt like certain people, they couldn't reach my standards. That's not to say I'm particularly interesting, great, smart, holier than thou, or whatever. It's just I felt like, this is what I expect from a relationship now, in a friendship. And if this person can't meet that and they're dragging me behind, then what do you do with them, right? I can't give you an answer. Everyone's going to do it differently. And I'm not going to mention names, obviously, from the real world. But that's just such an interesting question that I wanted to use to inform this story. It's very character driven. Everyone's like just simmering in this really ugly city that is Rostam. Everyone has a different backstory. Everyone has different social circles or no circle at all. They have friends, enemies, and things like that. So it's really interesting to explore the dynamics of who is going to grow, who's going to stay static, who's going to crack under the pressure and roll back, because that can happen too. And I feel like that's explored enough in stories. What if you have a dynamic character who is poised in the perfect position to change for the better, but they're so deep set in their old ways that they actually regress or become less than themselves? I feel like people don't do that enough. And that's another thing. I've mentioned this before. I don't really read. I actually never read for myself. That's just not how I learn ever since I was a little kid. But I write, so go figure, whatever. Shit, what was my point? Crap. But that's right. Yeah, but I'm primarily informed by movies. And that's another thing. I try writing stories that I want to see that I don't see out there yet, with themes that I don't think are being tackled enough, if at all. I want to see classic archetypes, motifs, and cliches be reverse engineered, broken down, and twisted into something totally new. Because everyone just keeps doing like Formula One, hero's journey, right? And it comes off as very bland, uninformed, corporate slop, Disney looking at you, everything you've purchased and demolished under your reign, under your banner. And I don't want to do that. I want to follow a formula or routine. I want to make a story that no one's seen before. And the best way to do that is by having characters who seem like they embody certain archetypes and tropes, but they don't take the path you expect. Not just because of themselves and their own burdens, but also because of the other people they meet and the connections those other people meet, right? Like, let's say we have character A, and then they meet character B, who's friends with C. What if character A and B are doing great together, but A and C have a fit, they have an issue, and then B turns on A, right? I know it's such a simple thing. It's basically a love triangle is what I just explained, or just a friend circle thing. But that's what makes this story so cool for me. Again, not a spoiler, but this is a story where it starts off and this character is alone, right? But then his world starts to get bigger. Like, not saying that Brostam literally, like, architecturally, tectonically expands, but the more he learns about the city, the more he knows, the more that he can take stock in, the more that he can control, the more that's working against him. And the more characters we meet along the way, his world actually gets bigger. And it's exciting for us as the reader. So it's kind of cool to see that shift in tone and structure. It starts off very isolated. You're just in this guy's head. But now he's talking to these other people who also have their grievances with the city, or who love the city even, or they're victims of it, or too far gone to help. And how is his interactions with them going to pan out? And how are his ethical principles going to inform them based on where he is currently, right? Like, if he meets someone very early on in his life and they establish a social contract between each other that he can no longer satisfy in the future, what's that going to mean for that relationship, right? So that's so important to me. But yeah, I could keep prattling on, but I love tying in different philosophical concepts. And you also have like more direct things. Like, there are characters who are blatantly nihilistic, per the German philosophers like Friedrich Nietzsche, Schopenhauer, stuff like that. And then you have, I also studied Eastern philosophy, Hinduism in particularly, and I have an actual Hindu character who's informed by the faith, which I loved studying because I found it so interesting. And I didn't drop her in there just to drop her in there. I'm like, she's going to be a really interesting learning tool for the main character, not in terms of like telling him what the right thing to do is, but telling him, hey, here's a whole new perspective for you. What are you going to do with this? And he can take it or leave it, but it's something that's in the cards now. So yeah, this story, it's a marriage of everything that I've learned so far, academically, professionally, and creatively, all rolled into one story. Like, this is going to be my penultimate piece, and I really want it to get published. So I'm planning to do the self-publishing route. I know there's like the big companies and stuff like that, but I don't think I got the money to do that. So I'd rather do this myself. I know it's going to be a very unique genre piece. It doesn't really fit anywhere. I know a lot of authors could probably say that. But I'm not going to waste my time trying to figure out where it belongs. I know it doesn't belong anywhere. So I just want to write it to the best of my ability, make it strong, make it good. And if I could just publish a digital version on Amazon, I'm done. That's all I need to do for myself. And if there's demand enough, then hey, maybe I could do hard copies. I don't know. But if I could do the bare minimum of publishing, I'm doing that. And it would be great. It would just be a nice change. And this is a story that I think is worth getting published. The other ones are a little rough. They weren't seen by many other eyes. And they weren't informed by recent experiences like Step Apex Rising is. So that's why I'm so excited about it. Right now I'm at like well over 300 pages, close to 400, and I'm aiming for 5 at the end. So I'm hoping I can finish the final draft, the rough draft, sorry, at the end of the year, maybe a little after, worst case. And then just go through, clean it up. I know exactly what steps I'm going to take on each pass to revise it, and then I'll see about publishing and go from there. But yeah, that's all I got. I mean, I could definitely keep going. This video is really freaking long. If you've watched or listened for this long, I commend you for that. I know I have a tendency to keep rattling on. I don't even know what time it is. It's definitely past 2. But yeah, I'm really excited about this project. If you have any questions about the writing process itself, about my story, let me know in the comments. And hell, I'm on Instagram. You can find me at Nightwatcher66, so you can find me there. And yeah, I'm really excited for this. I also have some people, well, in my writing group who are kind of peer reviewing sections of my story. The cool thing is someone was nice enough to set up a Discord. They could just submit snippets of your story and people can just peer review it for free, which is really nice. So I do have other eyes looking at what I'm doing, and they're willing to call me out if something's really out of order, which hasn't happened yet, but they're willing to point out any flaws or anything that's off. So it's good. Don't get a group that's totally biased if that's something you'd like to do. But yeah, get another pair of eyes looking over you, what you're doing, if you feel like you need that help and that guidance. But otherwise, trust your gut, find a good system, don't worry about the nitty-gritty details, just be sure it's well informed, and beyond anything else, just have fun. If for nobody else, for yourself, just do it for fun. Be sure it's fulfilling. Don't do it just to do it, right? Do it because it makes you happy and it does something for you that no other medium or person could do. So yeah, that's all I got. I could keep going, and I already have, and I'm sorry, that's what I tend to do. I guess I should go home and go to sleep, you think? I do have a small interview in the afternoon, but it's virtual, so I don't have to go anywhere. But anyways, thank you guys very much. Let me know what you thought. keep writing, do what you do. Let me know what you're working on as well. And I will see you next time.
That's all there is. There isn't any more.